some point, it's going to be irresponsible to not use the AI systems.
Yeah.
We as humans are very fallible. There's a reason for second opinions. My mother-in-law, decades ago now, passed away from lupus. It's a rare disease on the rare side. It takes 6 to 7 years to diagnose because it presents differently. And so how do you use the AI systems that don't forget, that don't get tired, that are more aware of all of the research that's taking place? So the biggest use cases now in the industry are really the lower risk ones. Ambient listening, it's taking off. The simple idea is it's taking notes, just that you and I would use GoToMeeting, or any other of these virtual platforms that can take meeting notes in the background. This is essentially what they're doing and putting that information in the EMR. Because the doctors, the healthcare practitioners did not get into healthcare to click a box, check another box, and find some new medication in a drop down somewhere. They want to take care of people. Let the AI take the notes and record the information.
Hello, I'm Deep Dhillon, your host, and today on your AI Injection, we'll explore AI-powered wearables, remote monitoring, and the ever-evolving landscape of digital health with RJ Kedziora, co-founder and COO of Estenda Solutions. RJ holds an MBA from Westchester University and a BS in computer science from Duquesne University. At Estenda, he leads the creation of tools that advance patient outcomes, streamline healthcare workflows, and enable evidence-based digital therapeutics. RJ, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Cool. So let's dig in. Maybe start by telling us when a typical customer calls you in, why do they reach out? Walk us through an engagement. Like what do they usually look like?
Yeah, absolutely. We are very much, as I think of it, as the front end of healthcare. We are working with startups, R&D departments of larger organizations, someone that has an idea but doesn't quite know or understand how to actually make sense of that idea and execute it on it. From a startup perspective, it's usually a person who's exited a venture or two and has some money and wants to do something in healthcare, but doesn't quite understand healthcare, or doesn't quite understand software, or is very scared of what it means to develop software that has to go to the FDA. That's where we fit in, and very much on the patient care of things. So as data is coming off of a medical device, how do we use that data? How do we visualize it? Clinical decision support algorithms, or even as that device is being used in the field, gathering real world evidence to make sure that it is operating as we intended. And what can we learn from that information? So very much on the patient health and wellness side of things. I like to think the applications we help develop for others are just improving our health and wellness out there, and not just in terms of sickness, but that health span. My personal goal is to live to 100 plus with a good quality of life, not just make it to 100, to continue to be able to do those triathlons and racing out there that I do and love.
Are you mostly on the patient side? Are you mostly on like helping physicians and kind of making them more efficient? Are you on the hospital, like operational side, operational efficiency side? And where do you see sort of the most action right now?
Yeah, so projects typically involve an MD and a PhD. As we're developing solutions, it's one thing for myself or a physician, PhD, to sit there and be like, oh yeah, we think this idea works. It's another to make sure it actually does work. So as we develop a new clinical algorithm, a new way of blood glucose treatment algorithms for someone with diabetes, does it actually work? So very much on the health and wellness of individuals. We've never done anything on the billing side of things. You mentioned efficiency. So efficiency ties into that from a patient population perspective. Where do I have to spend time? Like which segments of the population does it make sense to really engage with? That is a key factor in some of the projects that we're working on.
And so maybe set the context for a little bit. It sounds like, maybe the MD or the PhD or both of them are entrepreneurs. They're founding a startup. It's pre-seed. You're helping them maybe building out a team, like maybe they're new to the whole software product development side, or are they savvy operators and they're already aware of all of the nuances from FDA compliance to HIPAA and all of the usual, regulatory environments that you operate in within healthcare? And why are they reaching out to you in particular and your team? And how are you guys engaging maybe in the early days and then maybe a little bit later on?
Right. It's a good question, and it makes my days very interesting because I play as that high-level solution architect, helping envision, what the product can be. If it's a startup organization, it's we're bringing to the table, we are ISO 13485 certified, allows us to do medical software development. For those that are not familiar with what ISO 13485 is, it's a good, well-structured software development process. It's what the FDA here in the US or regulatory bodies, others around the world are looking for, that you have a good structured process in terms of development, that it's repeatable. So we get audited regularly by our customers, which is always interesting. But our typical engagement is exploring first that idea of what we're going to create. If you want to create another accounting system, it's not us. It's like accounting is fairly well established. It's looking at your blood glucose information, your blood pressure information, physical activity data, and trying to develop new insights from that information. You might have a different approach to helping an individual with diabetes, with congestive heart failure. Is that typical engagement? We've been lucky that we've been so much part of that solution creation. Customers over the years have put our names on patents. So we're very much assist at the early stages in the ideation. What does this have to do? How's it going to do it from that care management perspective, from the health perspective? And then we then have to translate that into the technology. Okay, so here's what we want to create, what we want to do, what are the business rules, the clinical rules, and then how are we actually going to architect and develop this system? Whether it's a mobile technology, a cloud-based system. And these days, how does AI feed into it? That's probably like the first question I get. It's like, oh, we want to do something with AI. And it's like, hold on. It's really about the data first and foremost. And we start exploring the data that they have access or that they want to make use of.
It sounds like you're working a lot on the clinical side and you're also starting really early in the cycle. So it's kind of a long journey to get from that early stage to honestly even a lot of times fundable startup, but certainly to like product deployment. So maybe walk us through some of what's your typical process? Like you engage really early, you get pulled in as a consultant on one of the NIH grants or something that these guys are working with, maybe in academia or in a research hospital. And then that kind of buys time and a little bit of budget to de-risk things a little bit, maybe get further along in the FDA process so that you can raise private capital. Is that a standard journey or is it something different? Or
yes, our engagements are not 3-month engagements. They're very long-term, typically engagements. A number of our customers we've been working with for 15, 20 years now on continual projects and improvements, new ideas and things like that. We are fortunate. We actually just received an NIH SBIR Phase 2 grant, working with Monell Chemical Centers here in Philadelphia around the idea of creating a smell test repository. So the loss of your sense of smell is a powerful indicator of potential issues of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. But it didn't get a lot of attention until COVID happened and we all started losing our sense of smell. Now everybody's like, oh, wait a minute, what does this mean? How do we provide value of this? What can it be a potential indicator of? And there's just not that standardized repository out there. So what was fascinating about being in this early stage of it, and we helped write the grant that was submitted to the NIH. And their initial reaction was like, well, this isn't interesting enough. It's like, okay, yes, there's a need for this repository, dedicated to olfactory smell test research. But how do we make it more interesting? And what we came up with, the group, was this idea of conversational analytics. And it's just where you're using a Gen AI approach to talking to the data to be able to understand and explore it. So one, trying to get new people into the field and understand what's going on. It's like, okay, you don't have to understand SQL or R or databases. We have a repository here. You can just start asking it questions to start exploring that data. And then as researchers are more experienced and want to look at this data across studies, they can start pulling out and extracting pieces of information. Talk about the journey. It was an 18-month journey from introduction to, okay, now the project has been funded and we're now we just passed our 3-month mark. We're 3 months into the opportunity here where we've been developing the platform to collect this data and start applying the conversational analytics to it. So yes, very long-term engagements.
I don't know if you want to double click on this project or another project, but I feel like we should double click on a project and kind of dig in a little bit. This one, you kind of open it up, so I'll start there. What exactly is in this repo? Are these like experimental results? What exactly is this data that you're sort of conversationally interacting with?
It's very research oriented. So as there are standard smell tests on the market, there's one called the Sentinel test, the NIH toolbox. There's a number of snip and sticks. These are, standardized smell tests that are on the market. And then you're going to do research around the use of these and then try and find those correlations and eventually causations into, what does the loss of smell mean? How do you create a better smell test? And so when you look at the data that's going to be uploaded into the repository, it's going to be that study research data. So it's, okay, here's a research study, a paper that we're considering. We have a theory that we're going to test, that the loss of smell is equated to, as an indicator of future incidents of Parkinson's or potentially concussion. You're going to execute in the smell test, actually administer it to the individual kind of thing, which is then going to generate data. Can you smell the scent of orange, of motor oil, of grass? And the industry is standardized across a number of these different smells. So we're going to gather that smell information into the database. Can you detect these?
Is that combined with like survey data? So you got a population, you're going to commit to giving them a smell test at regular intervals. And then you're going to ask them if you're sick, if you have the flu, or, like all kinds of like maybe health related.
Yes, exactly. How old are you?
And you'll have like a full longitudinal view on that population over time, but linked back to smell, something like that.
Yes. And then be able to take this data. And the NIH has created what are called common data elements, CDEs for short. And it's a method of standardizing these questions, particularly the survey questions, across various studies. So as we're gathering all this information, this group is asking about age, this group is asking about mental health conditions, this group is asking about concussion history. There's standardized methods of starting to ask those questions and gathering that data such that then you can start looking at it across studies to draw bigger correlations and start asking new questions and then generating new research grants.
So then the AI-ish angle here is, so you take the results of those patient longitudinal questionnaire plus olfactory kind of test results, and you pull that all into some kind of maybe semi-structured data repo with combination of generative stuff on the texty stuff and maybe generative stuff into SQL to be able to go in and out of maybe a business analytics system, something like that, to get you plots and figures and have like kind of nice clean way of interacting with it.
Absolutely. And I'm not the first person to use the term, but we're calling it conversational analytics. And the key for us is so you don't have to know SQL or R or SAS, some programming language, that you can just start interacting with this data. And then, as you said, you generate a nice graph, a chart, share that with colleagues. What do you think of, where I'm going with this? And then using that generative AI capability, I love asking Gen AI as I'm using it, what did I forget? Or what's the next step? Or, I probably almost never write a prompt just natively myself. I'm always like, help me write the prompts to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So how do we incorporate that same idea here? As someone's asking the question, we can then behind the scenes be like, okay, what's the next question that you should ask? And prompting the user, the human, to think about different.
Because you mentioned SBIR, so there's a commercialization component. So is the motivation for the client to then charge researchers on behalf of like usage of the platform or something like that? Or is it, they get some kind of special access to the data or early access to the data or something?
Yes, there is part of the phase 2 it is all about commercialization and how do you create a viable business model with this. So there is a commercial component to it. There's a free access to be able to get familiar with the data, understand it kind of thing. And then there's a paid model whereby you as an individual researcher are then gaining a deeper level of access. And then we have an enterprise subscription. So if you're a large organization, you could be able to import your own data and start experimenting with it instead of building your own repository. Let's start experimenting with this and seeing those early results. We're also going to build a community around all of this and an educational component. That's one of Monell's, the chemical smell center here in Philadelphia, is their mission, is just education around smell test. How do you do this properly and what are the options? So yeah, there'll be an educational community aspect to it as well.
Need help building a great chatbot, or perhaps help with computer vision, natural language processing, automated content creation, conversational understanding, time series forecasting, customer behavior analytics? Reach out to us at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. Maybe we can help.
What are you finding with respect to smell, the loss of it, and the changes in it? Like, what's the high-level state-of-the-art knowledge that we have today about this? What is it linked to? Why did we lose it during COVID? What does it mean? Like, why does anyone care about this? What is the clinical assessment of these tests, and what are they indicative of? If you can't smell motor oil, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I am not the PhD in smell tests and olfactory research. That's some of our colleagues that we're working with at Monell. They are the PhD that can do a deep dive on this. At the high level, it's in the potential indicators because it's very early on in the research of this. It just hasn't gotten a lot of attention. The idea of smell testing has been around for decades, and smell test isn't new, but it's just not widely accepted just yet. It's potential indicators of things related to the brain, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, concussions, an insight into what might be going on there. Why are you losing that sense of smell? And then if you have lost it, there are capabilities of then retraining and regaining that sense of smell. What I found fascinating is, and this is as we get into our engagements with various different customers, I'm not an expert. The people on the teams are not experts in the early, that specific field, because we are very much on the experimental side. So we do provide, some basic training to get people up to speed, but then it's working with that MD and the PhD to really figure out what does this solution need to do? How are we going to make it do? And so I've personally been learning a lot about the smell and research. And you think, okay, I lost my sense of smell. Honestly, at first I was like, oh, no big deal. But as you start digging into it and thinking about it, it's impacting your life. So if you can't smell and you go out to a restaurant with your friends and they're all like talking about, oh, this restaurant smells great, or the food we're about to eat smells so great, you're not experiencing that. So you're less a part of that social scene. But more importantly and urgently, if you're at home and there's a fire and, if your smoke alarm's not working, you're not going to smell that smoke. Or you have a little baby who soils themselves, you're not going to know that as soon as you might know it. And so now they might get diaper rash, and now they're going to be crying a lot more. So a lot of indicators there that at first glance I never even thought about. If you lose your sense of smell, it does have an impact on your life.
I mean, all the information ultimately that goes into our mind is coming in through our senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. But, we know an awful lot about sight and hearing, and maybe quite a bit about touch, but we know next to nothing about taste and smell. Taste maybe from the wine community or something, and maybe like the food companies that are always making stuff. But smell is definitely like a laggard, and you can imagine how much we care about loss of vision, not only because of the impact to the quality of your life, but what it says about something going on in your sort of neurological state. So it makes sense. It makes sense that it's a gap. It was sort of curious during COVID how it was like the first time that that particular thing became such a huge indicator. So I don't know, like physiologically, like, do you know the mechanism of smell? Is it like related to the, the nervous system, any of that?
That's where you have to go talk to the PhDs.
Yeah, I'm curious because it makes sense that the NIH would be interested in us getting a lot more knowledge there because it's a potential entire new line of inquiry that could lead to quite a bit. So I think that gives me a sense. Are these like academic partners or this is a private company that you're working with?
In this case, there's an academic partner, like Monell is an academic institution, and then there is a company called Ursula Health, which is the commercial partner. They actually licensed a smell test called the Sentinel from Monell, and that's what's driving their company. So it's the three of us as an entity that are driving the overall project.
And do you guys usually take like an equity stake in the startups, or are you more like contract for hire to?
Yeah, we've always done contract for hire with a client, and they own everything that is developed. So
Yeah. Okay. Maybe what's another example of a project that you can talk about? You don't have to name names of companies. I understand that.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work in diabetes. So one of the projects that we've been doing for 20 years is called the Joslyn Vision Network, and it's a diabetic retinopathy telesurveillance program.
Okay.
And so if you have diabetes, you can get diabetic retinopathy, which is the leading cause of preventable blindness. It's just if you have diabetes, you don't feel it every day, but it's infecting the microvascular, those small blood vessels in your fingers, your hands, your eyes. And so if we find the incidence of disease, then we can make a difference there. So we've been running this project for 20 plus years now within the Indian Health Services here in the US, which is responsible for the Native American population. Probably about 100 cameras deployed across the US. And you're taking a digital photo of the back of your eye, the retina of your eye. And as you look at that image, you can find incidences of diseases. And it started out, it was all human read, but now we're training AI systems through machine learning to be able to do that and accelerate the reading of these images. What's interesting and fascinating about the machine learning aspect of it, some of the earliest approved FDA AI algorithms for doing this were approved back in like 2017 in the area of diabetic retinopathy. But the challenge of using these AI systems as the technology changes and increases, those old AI systems don't work anymore with these newer images. Just greater density of pixels, wider range of field of view. That's one of the challenges we're facing now. As older technology, very narrow area of the back of your eye. Now you have ultra wide, which is just so much more information. The original AI algorithms were trained don't work with these newer images.
Pre-deep learning algorithms.
Yeah, so we're getting into all that, and we got to make sure that it works and put it out there.
Tell me more about that. That sounds like an interesting project. So, like, what's the actual imagery that gets captured? Is this when you're at the optometrist? Where's the light shine, and where's the photo coming from?
Yeah, so as you are, and particularly for this project, it's with the Native American population. So as you're going to a community health clinic or hospitals that might be available, kind of thing, you're going to have a camera from manufacturers such as Optos. They're one of the vendors that we work with. You don't have to have your eye dilated, which is really nice because people just find that annoying. I find it annoying. And it's taking, you look into it and it uses a laser, scans the back of your eye. Takes,
You mean like
the back of your eyeball? Yeah, so your eye
is coming in from the front. So this is just like the standard, because like now, like some optometrists have pretty high res images of the eye. Are we talking about the same thing? Or are we talking about something?
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you go to your optometrist, you might even see an Optos camera there. I have when I've gone for my annual exhibit there, and it's like, oh, look at that. I know what that camera is. And use it to take the eye imagery in there, where we're worried just about vision in general. We're looking specific at diabetic retinopathy.
You get the image, you've got the patient. Do you have it connected to their longitudinal history too?
Yes. So we take that image where it's at a community health center in rural America. It goes back to a reading center in Phoenix where right now people are evaluating those images, and it's connected to the patient's medical record system, their EMR.
Yeah.
So you're creating this now comprehensive picture of what's going on with that patient. And you first do we think of it as a go, no-go assessment. Like, is there any incidence of disease here? Because if there isn't, then it's like, okay, move on, we're done. And we return a report back to the physician, to the community health worker, to the patient to be like, okay, you're good. Here's the follow-up recommendation, come back in a year or 2 years based on your history, which is really nice. And then all that's stored in an electronic medical record system. So when you come back in years down the road, we now have this history of even what your retina looked like. If we do find incidents of disease, it's then the recommendation does go back. It's like, okay, you need to see a specialist. We need to take care of this. And how do we then match you up with the resources to take care of that?
Walk me through a little bit on your ground truth definition process, because I think this is interesting. You have this imagery, you've got longitudinal health history, you have a large repo of this. You can potentially go in and find images, like you could start to build out a training data set around particular diseases. So do you have a clinical team of maybe ophthalmologists and maybe optometrists, but that are fed something that you think is disease X, Y, or Z, and then they're validating or not validating based on the imagery and maybe some other aspects, and then you're building up that data set, and then you're able to decouple model construction, refinement, and assessment against that data set, something like that?
Yes, and we've been doing this for 20 years, so we have a huge repository of imagery to be able to do that, and we've developed the systems to take an image, a particular image, to generate our training set, and we would show it to two different trained specialists. What do you see? Any incidence of the disease? What level of incidence do you see? What are you looking at to be able to find that in this image? And if those two opinions correlate, like if they're similar, then it's like, okay, there's our gold standard. If not, it then, as in the past, it goes to a third person, the higher level of expertise, to adjudicate it and say, okay, this is what it is. So over the years, we've built up this gold standard of imagery that we use for training purposes of humans. Here's, and what you need to see and look at kind of thing. But now it's like, okay, we can use this to train an AI system to be able to see this and evaluate it. And it's been interesting because there are multiple models out there, and you go and use the Googles in the cloud, and it costs X thousands of dollars, and it's like, okay, this for the Indian health services, the cost is it's exorbitant, and for the project budget, it's exorbitant.
Well,
so
also that imagery is highly specialized, so generalized models are not going to do.
No, they're not. You're not taking these images and dropping them into ChatGPT or anything like that and getting meaningful results.
I'm curious, give me a sense of the ground truth size at this point. How many diseases do you have? How many examples for?
So we have very narrow focus on diabetic retinopathy.
Okay.
That's made our life easier, because when you talk about that ground truth, it's like, okay, diabetic retinopathy is what we are focusing on. I know there are other vendors out there that are looking at the same type of images for just correlation to cardiac issues, to general health.
So there's all kinds of stuff, schizophrenia,
all sorts of kinds of things that you can assess from that image, which is fascinating. One of the things I saw a while ago, a research report where just looking at the retina, the AI was able to detect gender, but nobody was quite sure how or what was it keying off of to be able to do that. Yeah. But it just goes to show the AI sees stuff you and I don't.
Have data, have a hypothesis on some high-value insights that, if extracted automatically, could transform your business? Not sure how to proceed? Bounce your ideas off one of our data scientists with a free consult. Reach out at Xionics.com. You'll talk to an expert, not a salesperson.
So in this case, does the IHS, is the data set made public, or is it anonymized public for other researchers?
So we have anonymized that data for use in our controlled research studies for use in NIH. We have partnered with third-party companies for them to use this information, but that is very controlled situations with permission of the Indian health services are very well aware of when those data sets are shared, but it is anonymized information to be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't know of any super great eye data sets that are on this kind of a scale. So your disease count would be just diabetic retinopathy.
That's what we focused
And you
on
have
for this.
thousands, hundreds of thousands of examples, I guess, of various states of disease retinopathy or something.
It's in the tens of thousands, yeah.
But enough to train up some deep learning based
Yes.
models that, with some transfer.
Yeah, to train it to then evaluate it. So we have our gold standard training set, then like an evaluation training set. How's it doing?
And so have you guys operationalized these models? I assume the idea is like patient comes into clinic and gets assessed like on the fly and then gets sent for further screening or the expert follow-up or something.
Yeah, so the system overall has been operationalized from a human perspective. The AI is the next step. So we're still working through that to create a good model and then roll that out later this year.
And do you guys do the model construction yourselves or do you like hire it out or does your client do it?
Yeah, we work in multiple models. In this case, we are doing it. In other cases, we have partnered with third-party companies to do that. I'm very comfortable working in multiple models.
Cool. So, okay, we've talked about a few different things. We've talked a lot about eyeballs and disease assessment there. So, what do you think are sort of the main thrusts right now? Like, it seems like, there's a lot of activity around diagnosis assistance. I kind of tend to generalize that up a level, like physician's assistants. Whatever a physician does, can we help them? This would be like heartbeat anomaly detectors, eye scan assistants, MRI assessments to help, radiologists. Like that whole arena is one area. Yeah, what are the big areas that you think are seeing the most promising beneficial aspects of AI? And I kind of want to anchor this conversation a little bit because I get asked this all the time as, an AI consultant. It's like, so do you think all this AI is terrible? Like that's sort of the de facto positioning. And it's like, no, I definitely do not think it's all terrible. And they're like, well, what possible good could it have? We're all just going to get addicted to talking to this bot, and then our kids are going to grow up not knowing how to interact with real humans who don't say they're perfect all the time. I was like, that will be a problem, just like it was with phones. But will save a lot of lives at the same time. So
that's absolutely it. At some point, it's going to be irresponsible to not use the AI systems.
yeah,
We as humans are very fallible. There's a reason for second opinions. There's a reason my mother-in-law decades ago now passed away from lupus. It's a rare disease on the rare side. It takes 6 to 7 years to diagnose because it presents differently. And so how do you use the AI systems that don't forget, that don't get tired, that are more aware of all of the research that's taking place? I can't keep up with one journal, let alone all the journals out there and all the medical researches. So the biggest use cases now in the industry are really the lower risk ones. Ambient listening, it's taking off. The simple idea is it's taking notes, just that you and I would use GoToMeeting, or any other of these virtual platforms that can take meeting notes in the background. This is essentially what they're doing and putting that information in the EMR. Because the doctors, the healthcare practitioners did not get into healthcare to click a box, check another box, and find some new medication in a drop down somewhere. And they want to take care of people. And this is one of those mechanisms that is letting them get back to caring for the people, listening to the conversation. Let the AI take the notes and record the information. And what's slowly starting to happen, a couple of vendors have this out now, is that you're marrying together all of that information with the research data. So one, are they diagnosed with a specific version of cancer and they have a specific gene? Oh, we're aware of a clinical trial which is looking for people like this. Let's bring these people together. Or there's an off-label use of medication that someone's using for treatment of a rare disease. Let's try and use that. So a lot of those instances where you're putting together this information where you and I just can't remember all of this stuff or be aware of it is a powerful opportunity.
I'm going to push back a little bit so we can tease this out, but I'm curious, If we rewind like 5 years ago, because you work with healthcare startups, I work with healthcare startups, I think you're likely extremely well aware of how careful and cautious one is and how the FDA is in general, right? Anything that at all can be kind of construed as offering medical advice or medical feedback or anything to do with the word diagnosis is flagged. I want to reconcile that with the state of today, where, I was just chatting with my sister yesterday. She's a physician, and she doesn't actually have a patient that doesn't come in with like a diagnosis in quotation marks from OpenAI telling them what they've got. And she's like, all roads lead to cancer, according to OpenAI. But like, that's not actually what's going on here. What happened there? How did we go from a world where everyone was scared to death of the FDA and anyone who's actually offering something that a physician actually uses going through a credible review process to a world where everyone under the sun is just talking to a bot that, maybe in the early days tried not to offer medical advice, but now has no problems whatsoever offering all kinds of detailed medical advice? It seems to me like the FDA either totally dropped the ball or it's just too big now. It's too intertwined with a multi-trillion-dollar economy.
There are a lot of things going on. So in the small startup world, yes, there is still absolutely, I wouldn't say fear of, but a recognition of we need to listen to the FDA and follow their guidelines. And you see this a lot, not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure an illness. This is general feedback for informational purposes only. That's why we're putting it out there. And even in the early days of, and I'll just generically talk about ChatGPT, but it's any of them, is that they did have warnings. This is not intended to be a medical, treatment. We are not a doctor. We are not healthcare. Use this with a grain of salt. They are getting away from that. I think two aspects. One, you said they are just huge now. And they have so much money, I don't know how much they're really concerned about it now.
And they know now that no one can shut them off without shutting off the economy at this point.
Globally, and it's not even the US, it's like globally this would have an impact if you said we're shutting you down.
Oh yeah, if you shut down all three of them tomorrow, it'd be like shutting down power. I mean, it would be a big problem.
It absolutely would be. So it's not happening realistically overnight. The other here in the US, particularly the current administration, is taking a very hands-off approach, really stepping back and reducing the number of regulations and saying, go run with this, which is a mixed bag, because as you take your hands off the till and you're not directing it, then scary things can happen. And that's what we're seeing. OpenAI specifically, they released ChatGPT 5, and as part of their push into the world, they had specific examples of people were using it for medical care. That's, I think it was an example of a woman with cancer.
Let's be clear. Like, have you ever not used it for medical care? I mean, like, I use it all the time.
I use it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we all do this. We might say we don't, but everybody does this. If for nothing else, to figure out what the heck all the gibberish is that you were told by your specialist.
And that's, we did this with Google 3 years ago, and now we're doing it with this. I think the challenge here is that it very often appears authoritative, which is challenging. So as a person in the field and working with these technologies, I wholeheartedly advocate to use it, but check with a medical professional. Just don't take its advice blindly.
You've heard of I think this paper came out like 3 or 4 weeks ago where there's a particular class of mental health disorders where the worst thing you can possibly do is engage in the delusion with the mental health patient, which is exactly what all three of them do. They're like, oh, you think you're Jesus? Well, you must be, and they think it's like a joke. The models do, so they play along. But meanwhile, you could just look in these logs, and just today, I think it was Hasbro, Mattel, one of the major toy manufacturers, big surprise, like announced that they've got this partnership with OpenAI and they're going to embed AI in all the stuffed animals. I guess I'm curious, from where you sit, what do you think are the second order effects that are going to be the biggest problems of the next generation? Like, when I think of the second order effects of social media, for example, like, oh, social media in the early days, look, it's so great. Everybody can talk to everyone across borders and, all of humanity is going to be all lovely. And then meanwhile, Zuckerberg and all of his zeal deploys it in Burma and, with no translators whatsoever. And next thing you know, there's almost 1 million people being hunted down and killed through rumors being spread on the platform. You've got an epidemic of 14-year-old girls in severe depression and near suicide, upticks in those rates. It seems to me the second order effects of this are not understood, but are going to be profound. So much of our social dysfunction amongst our youth stems from the fact it's less about any particular app, according to the research. It's more about the lack of in-person interaction as a result of it. And if anything is going to take away in-person interaction, it's going to be AI. It already does. I already have my more interesting conversations with one of the better models at this point.
I brainstorm with it 10 times a day, where I used to maybe have
And
called
when you talk to
somebody
more
or
than
something like
GPT?
that. It's so easy to be like, hey, what do you think of this? Generate me 10 ideas around this and run with it. I think that second order issue is interesting, and I think it relates to critical thinking, which is it's our humanity and our ability, what makes us human, and its ability to think critically. That's where it's going to have this impact, because yes, it's a perpetual intern. It's an 80% solution where it is today. Its capabilities today. It's very capable. It's very intelligent, quote unquote, intelligent. It's not human intelligence. I think of it as I was thinking about this over the weekend. It's an alien intelligence, AI. If an alien came to the planet and didn't quite know what was going on, but it had studied a lot of information that it had heard over the airwaves, it could communicate with us, but it's not going to get everything just quite right all the time, kind of thing. We do anthropomorphize it and make it seem human, but it's not, and that's okay. It's that demise of critical thinking where it comes off as authoritative. And if you ask it, some obscure question, it's going to likely come back with an answer. And then, is it right? Lawyers have gotten in trouble a lot with this of it's making up cases, and then they're just not checking it and submitting it to the court, and the court does the work. The administration, they released here in the US a huge report on the health of the Americans, and there was immediately people were like, well, your references, this doesn't exist. This reference doesn't exist.
The critical thinking thing is interesting because I feel like there's a pro and a con side. I'm not one of those people who thinks humans are that intelligent and capable in general. I think we have very capable of deep critical thinking humans, but I don't think that's the norm. The level of reasoning and thinking you get from these higher stack models like O3 and 5, which is probably leaning on O3 underneath, is better than the majority or the vast majority of humans in the vast majority of cases. Can it outperform a deep specialist in their area of expertise? A lot of the times, yes. Depending on how much you're willing to pay and how much GPU you're willing to give it, but not all the time. So I think we have maybe another year or two where we get to pretend that we're better. But I don't think 2 years ago I thought we'd be here, and I certainly didn't think so 4 years ago, and I absolutely didn't think so 5 years ago. So I think there could be a benefit, right? Right now, those of us who are cognitively challenged get our brilliant ideas from the social media toilet that is all kinds of stuff feeding our preconceived notions of the world. And so we run around and spout nonsense conspiracy theories, and sometimes we wind up in the Oval Office, and the world is a lot more dysfunctional as a result. But AI systems, they're a lot better than the social media dribble. In general, if you ask these models a question, it's anchored in fact. Kudos to the companies, at least at this state in evolution, for not playing along with the conspiracy mongering that the social media companies blatantly embrace. And so maybe people get better, right? Maybe there's an optimistic view here where a 90 IQ person suddenly gets to lean on a 140 IQ bot and has less dumb ideas than before. And maybe if they learn nothing else, it's to ask the bot to assess the thing that the bot just said, and maybe they start to figure it out. The analogy I use is if you take a 2-year-old and you raise them in a family of conspiracy-laden, non-rational, non-educated thinkers in a society, or let's say maybe a town like that, And then you take that same kid and you raise them, with a couple of professors, like intellectuals, like deep thinker types. They're going to have two very different outcomes in life. And we suddenly took a lot of that second category and we made it at least accessible to that kid in the small town. I don't know. I mean, it feels to me like there is a potential for a lot of good. I do think there's like 10 different ways till Tuesday that this will go south. And I think it probably comes back to business models and how these companies really make money. Right now, I'm actually encouraged that Google's a good example. I'm actually encouraged that Google is figuring out how to monetize their AI in a way that does not involve ads. Because I feel like that's probably a net positive for humanity.
I would say that is a net positive. I love the historical perspective of this too, because we as humanity have gone through this with the printing press.
Yeah.
And it's like when we've all started having more access to books and reading material, it was demonized. It's like, oh, reading is bad. We're not going to be able to remember anything anymore.
Yeah, that was like in the Plato. That was back in, I think it was
Way,
Plato
way back when.
about this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
They were really
We've
pissed
all
off
sort of-
about the loss of the oral tradition due to writing. It's,
so it's not a new concept that this technology is going to be the downfall of humanity. You look at electricity, same thing. The telephone. I've had this conversation numerous times of like telephone versus text message. And when we all started text messaging years ago, oh, how is my kid like ever going to survive in the world because he text messages, he doesn't pick up the phone and call somebody. But as we all sort of move forward through time, it's like text messages is universally like the accepted method of communicating now. We've adapted to it. The challenge, I think, with AI and where we are today is it's happening so fast.
oh my God.
We don't have the time to adapt to it. And that's what's making it much more challenging. And that critical thinking skill is interesting. My daughter just today started her professional career as a 7th grade English teacher. And it's like, how are you going to deal with AI and writing and this critical thinking?
That's a whole other
skills?
topic that you can.
But we still teach math, but we have calculators. It's like we didn't stop learning math, but yeah, if I'm doing math today, I'm using a calculator or writing a program to do it or using Excel to do the math for me. But we still teach math. We're still going to teach reading and writing.
I think that your critical thinking phrase is still resonating with me. The question I ask is, what is the most important skill that people learn? I think critical thinking is probably it, right? The ability to really play the role of the editor, the critic, and be really suspicious about because I find that's what I do a lot now with these models. Whereas before, I was doing the bulk of the writing, the bulk of the reading, the bulk of the consumption, the bulk of the thinking. I don't almost need to do that anymore. It's like I can, but maybe we're the last generation that can't even do that. But what I have to still do is be really critical with the models. I find myself doing code review from bot-generated stuff more than ever now, and having discussions that are skeptical when it comes up with ideas. But I feel like that ability to assess what's being told to you and whether or not it's really true is going to be essential. And I don't know, I feel like this is going to be increasingly difficult. Right now, the bulk of our interactions with AI is coming from us knowing we're interacting with AI. But, there's millions of developers right now plugging this stuff into everything from stuffed animals to, a tricorder that our physicians are going to hold. It's not always going to be the case that you even think of it as I'm interacting with AI.
It's going to fade into the background. You're going to be using it and not even generally be aware that you're using AI. You sort of broached another topic, which is a issue that is happening is we're going to develop this gap in expertise. So we have these senior developers, architects, people with years of experience that know how to program can, interestingly, when they see code, we're like, hey, something doesn't smell right,
Yeah.
and can really look at it and start asking questions and digging into it. So now as people are coming through various training programs, their educational degrees, getting hit in the industry, the technology today can do the job of a junior developer. And it's becoming, okay, how do I talk to a conversational programming? But you won't have that critical skill or knowledge experience to be like, oh, well, that's That's from a cybersecurity perspective, like that's just horrible what it actually put out there. And so, 5 years from now, we have this gap of like expertise and knowledge kind of thing to question it. The hope is that the AI technologies get better and better and start incorporating, the necessary cybersecurity and everything. But yeah, it gets interesting if this, I think that gap in expertise that's going to start developing.
This has been a really fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to wrap us up on one final question that I always ask everyone. So given kind of where you're sitting in the healthcare arena, bringing kind of a lot of this advanced technology to the fore, paint the picture for us, 5 to 10 years out on how our interactions with healthcare is changed, and give me the utopian, but I'm kind of always also interested in the dystopian version. Like, what are the things that freak you out, and what are the great things that are going to happen as well?
I mentioned that I have this life goal of living to 100 plus with a good quality of life. I truly think AI is going to be one of those things that enables it. So much of our health happens outside of healthcare. It's what I do day to day. When I wake up and what do I eat, and going for a walk after a meal makes a difference. The AI is going to be able to engage with that wearable data, understand what's going on, be able to provide advice and recommendations that are useful to me as an individual, targeted to me as an individual. If I don't understand something, hey, explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, and I'm going to have meaningful results. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then we're starting to see a lot of that, those capabilities today, that very personalized information and interactions. That's going to continue to get better as we move forward. So yeah, I think the AI is going to help enable me reach that goal of 100 plus and with a good quality of life. So that's the utopian vision, that we all are able to reach that and expand our lifespans and live well, kind of thing. The dystopian side, I don't even want to go there.
I think we have an obligation as like technologists to like think about what are the potential drawbacks. I mean, the obvious one is like, maybe we get it wrong. Maybe we don't live to be 100 plus. Maybe we live to be 200 plus. And now we have an entire planet of like super duper duper old people in a society that's biased towards that. Like that alone seems problematic. I mean, it's a good problem.
Ton of problems with it. And as you can imagine, when we do take on projects, risk management is a huge aspect of it. Yeah. So you do have to think about these, and you do have to think about the privacy of the data and everything that's related to it to make sure that you are mitigating anything that might occur. Yeah, I hope humanity, it's going to take some time, but we're going to figure it out, work it out. The technology is going to get better. This is the worst it's going to be. It's going to get better. And I love a quote by Bill Gates that says, we tend to overestimate what's possible the next 2 years. We underestimate what's possible in 10. I don't think we can even envision where this is going to be in 10 years.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been a really great conversation.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's all for this episode. I'm Deep Dhillon, your host, saying check back soon for your next AI injection. In the meantime, if you need help injecting AI into your business or project, reach out to us at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. Whether it's text, audio, video, or other business data, we help all kinds of organizations like yours automatically find and operationalize transformative insights.